Real estate investment practice problem using Excel. Amortization schedule with early payments. Get ready, because we're raising the stakes with real estate. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that we have 3 tabs on down below: example, practice, and blank. Let's take a look at the example tab, in essence being the answer key. Scenario this time being, we have a situation where we're trying to lock down the 30-year loan, have a fixed payment, one which that we think we can pay and feel comfortable with over time, but also be planning that we're going to be paying more than that amount to try to pay it off earlier. How can we do some comparisons in that scenario? Meaning we're setting up a payment and hoping that and checking with the loan to be able to allowed to pay more than that if we so choose, and then plan for paying more than that and be able to compare and contrast different scenarios where we'd actually be able to pay more than the minimum payment. So let's take a look at those types of scenarios. The second tab over here is going to be the practice tab, which will have some pre-formatted cells that you can enter data into with less formatting involved. The third tab is going to be the blank tab. We're going to be working it from scratch or put the new items in there from scratch. So here's going to be our starting data. We're going to have the loan at the $300,000. We're not going to put anything down just so we can work with our loan, basically the starting point at the $300,000. It's a 30-year loan. 30 times 12 is 360. We're going to imagine the rate to be 4%, and we're going to not have anything else involved, including no points involved here or lender credits. You can imagine those things being involved if they would be applicable, and then do the same kind of scenario to try to think about what would happen if those things were involved and you paid it off early. And then you can look at things with the tools we've been looking at, including the internal rate of return, to see whether or not they would be beneficial given the fact that you're planning on paying the loan off early and so on. So then we're going to say that the rate is going to be that 4%. We got the payment then calculated using our payment calculation at the $1,432.25. That then is going to be populated in our amortization table. We could check that it's populated properly by going down to the bottom of it, seeing that it then scrolls down to 0, so it looks like it's calculating the way it should. Now let's copy this over. This is our standard amortization table, and think about what would happen if I started to increase the payments over time, paying more than the payment that is the minimum payment that we're required to do, making sure that we're able to do that in the particular loan structure that we have set up in order for this to happen. So we're going to be copying from cells A over to I. We're going to select from A to I, right-click on that selected area, copy, pasting that in column K, and then we're just going to reformat our data for our starting point, meaning I want to make sure anything that's an absolute reference in the cells over here is going to be coming from our data set right next to it rather than the prior data set. We know that there's an absolute reference in the payments here. It's referencing column B. I'm going to delete that and reference then this 4% down here in column L. Hit F4 on the keyboard, absolute reference, $sign before the L and the 14. So let's do that one more time because I picked up the wrong cell somehow, apparently. This equals the 1432. We're going to say F4 on the keyboard and enter. Going to put my cursor back on it, double click on the fill handle, bringing that all the way down. The interest also is going to need to be adjusted, so it's coming from column B with that absolute reference. I'm going to bring it from this percent right there. Select F4 on the keyboard, $sign before the L and the 14. Put my cursor back on it, double click on the fill handle, copying it down. Then I will typically change something just to double check, say the rate to 3%, and then scroll on down and see if it still populates and calculates the way it should. It should add up to 0 at the bottom line. So that looks like it is doing what it should be doing. Let's put it back up to 4 then. So our scenario then being, we're going to say, okay, that's going to be my minimum payment, but I'm going to try to increase my minimum payment. We're going to say after year 1, we're going to increase it by 10%. We think that we're going to get a raise or something like that. We're going to have the funds in order to increase our payment. So we want to have a payment that we make sure we're comfortable with, even if there's a downturn, even if there's a problem. And then if we're allowed to, making sure that we're able to, in the loan structure we have set up, try to increase the payment in order to pay it off earlier. If we were to do so, then of course we would be paying less interest, given the fact that interest is in essence rent, on the purchasing power over time. If we pay it off earlier, we're paying less interest. Let's start off with the first one. We're going to start at year 1, will be the same amount. And then I'm just going to increase the amount by 10% each period. So I'm going to take the prior period times 1.1, which is 110%, so a 10% increase. And so there we have it. Same thing down here, the one above it times 1.1. I can copy that cell down, and it'll always take the one above it times 110%, or 1.1. And so we're going to be increasing our payments. And then in year 5, I'm just going to assume that we'll keep it at the 2097 and then populate that for the rest of the 30 years or whatever years will be remaining after we increase the payments. So to see this up top, I think one of the easier ways to do this is to try to delineate the years with different colors. So I'm going to make all the even years, or the even years that are applicable, green, so I could see this nice banded kind of format. Selecting everything in year 2, right-clicking, going to make it this light green right there. And then we've got year 3, and then year 4, I'm going to make the light green. So we've got these every other year banded, so that we've got these delineations that are easy to see with the colors, and then we can apply out our changes. So obviously we have the payments that are coming from this cell. That's going to be our payment. But if we choose to pay more, and we are allowed to, then we can just basically increase the payment amount that we're going to be making. So if down here in year 2, we say, I believe I'm going to be able to pay a 10% increase at that time, increasing it by $1,575, we could just come down here and say, I'm going to make this equal to that 1,575 about, it's rounded, and then enter. So that means that that's going to be our new payment. The interest calculation is going to be still calculated on the prior balance as of that time. The interest rate is the same, divided by 12, no change there. Now we have this increased payment, and we have the interest that's still calculated on the prior balance with that 4%. So that increases the amount of the decrease in the principal. That means the principal balance will go down by more. That means that the next calculation of interest will be less, and we'll have more principal because we're paying down the principal. The easiest way, I think, to copy this cell down, because all these cells right here need to be the same number. So you could delete them this way. And I think the easiest way to do it is to say equals the one above it, and then copy that down. You can also make this one an absolute reference if you so choose, and copy it down to 24. So I'm going to go ahead and put my cursor on the fill handle. I like doing it this way oftentimes. So there we have it. So now we've got our new payments. Interest is still being calculated based on the 4%, no change there, and whatever the balance of the loan is, there's going to be a change in the decrease in the loan balance. It's going to go up because we're paying more than the minimum amount we're required to pay this thing off in 30 years, resulting in us being able to pay this thing off sooner. So then if we go down to the 3rd year, we're going to increase it by another 10% to 1733. So if I go down here and say, all right, what if I increase this one to 1733 now? 1733, I'm going to say the one below it equals the one above it. Put my cursor back on that, drag it on down for all of year 3, where we increase the payment. And so that's going to basically increase the amount, where the interest is still going to be calculated based on the prior balance, whatever that is now, times the interest rate divided by 12 to get the monthly rate. That hasn't changed in terms of the calculation. And we're going to decrease more of the principal, given the fact that we paid more, and we're still calculating the interest at the 4% of whatever the principal is. The principal is now going down faster, and we're paying more. Therefore, the balance is going to be decreasing. We're going to pay this thing off sooner. So if we go then back down, we're going to go to year 4. We're going to do this 2 more times. In year 4, we're going to increase the principal to 1,906 payments that we think we're going to be making in 4 years, because we're going to be making good money in 4 years. We're going to pay the whole thing off by that time. We'll be doing real good. So we're going to then copy this down, copy that down. So same thing. So now we've increased the principal payments. The interest is still being calculated on whatever the prior balance is times the 4%, but we think we're going to pay it off earlier. And then if I go down to 5, let's do it one more time. This time I'm going to copy it all the way down. I'm going to say we're going to then increase it in year 5 to that 2097 about, And we're just going to do that all the way down for the rest of however long the payments are structured. Well, hold on a second. I got to make that an absolute reference. Let's make it an F4 on the keyboard. And then I'll double click on it, copying it down. So now this is the amount that we're gonna assume we pay from year 5 on till the end. Once again, the interest is being calculated in the same fashion, prior principal times that 4% divided by 12. And then we've got the payment now at the 2097. So that's going to make an increase. We're decreasing the principal by an increase. We're increasing the decrease in the principal going down more drastically. So if we were to look at this, then I can say, okay, what's going to happen? Scrolling on down, we're going to finish this thing off. If we were to do that somewhere around 18 years instead of 30 years, we would have paid it off, much sooner in that event. Notice everything under here, under this point, is now going to be red. I'm gonna make this like green or something. Let's make that green. Now that's kind of messy. We could kind of close up the table at this point in time, but if we want to see the calculation of just what my total interest can be, we can keep the table at this, because then we can use it to basically do different kinds of calculations. So if I wanted to sum this stuff up, I can say, all right, let's see where I stand then in terms of the interest. I can say my total interest would then be, let's say this is going to be the cash flow. Let's do our cash flow thing, making this a header, black and white on the header. And then we'll center it, wrap it, and center. And this is going to be 0, 1, 2. And then we'll just add this down. Say we're going to finish this thing off in this many periods, which happens to be 18 years or 214 payments. And then we can just basically add up what the payments are. We can say, okay, that's going to be equal to let's do our cash flow thing. We're going to say the loan was the 300,000 we got, and then we got minus the payments of the 1423. So we could double click that on down, and that will give us then our cash flow to that point. We can calculate the total equals the sum of our cash flow as we've seen in the past. So that would be the sum of our cash flow, and the IRR then equals the IRR should still be 4%. So, and by the way, this last payment, however, is slightly different. This last payment is going to be not that 2097, but simply whatever we need to finish this off, which is going to be the 384. So that's a little bit more precise, equals the IRR. Summing this all up, we can then say, okay, we're going to sum that up and enter. Let's make that a percent, add some decimals, and we're going to multiply it times 12 to give it a yearly rate, and that'll give us our yearly rate. Make it a percent and then add some decimals. So we're at that 4%. Now you could also, in order to clean this up a bit, you might make it into basically a pivot table. You can also work with it as a pivot table. It might make it a little bit easier to see as well. So if we were to insert the classic pivot table we worked with here, insert the pivot, and we could say we want this in the existing worksheet. I'm going to put it in X to the right-hand side and say OK. There we have it. Let's do our pivot table calculations. Year, we got the payment. Well, let's put the year over here. And then we got the payment, the interest, the loan balance. I'm going to do this fast because we've seen this in the past, but I can then sum this up. We could say let's do the value, and we're going to go to the numbers, make that currency, brackets, remove the $sign, remove the decimals. Okay, let's do it here again. Values, let's say we're going to say this is going to be numbers, currency, brackets, remove the $sign, remove the decimals. Okay. We'll take the next one on down. Values, number format, currency, brackets, remove the $sign, remove the decimals. Okay. Last one's a little bit different. We're going to say we want that one, and then we're going to make this the min balance to take the minimum of the loan and the number format, which is the same format, currency, brackets, remove the dollar sign, no decimals, okay, okay. So there we have that. And then if we format this, we can get it like a yearly breakout. It still has those negative numbers, but it might be a little bit easier for us to do some comparisons. Put some brackets around it. Let's put some brackets around it. And then let's move this whole, can I move this whole thing up? I want to move it up a whole cell for the headers. Put it up there. There we go. And then we're going to make this black and white. Let's wrap the text, center it. And then we could squish it together a little bit. Squish it together like so. And so then you can see things like the total interest. You can sum up the total interest, which comes out to this 126, 128, and compare that to what we had before, which would be the 215,609. So you could take a look at some calculations like that. You can look at the total payments here, which in essence would be these items. And then you've got the ending balance as of that one. So it'd be about 425,823 versus the total here, total payments to 515,609. So you could do some, fairly nice comparisons with the pivot table. Might make it a little bit easier to see with the 30 years. But notice that this adjustment, once you get the adjustment into the amortization table, it becomes a lot easier to basically make these adjustments. And again, these are things that you can't really do so easy on most of the online amortization table tools. If you set it up in Excel, then you can make these kind of adjustments fairly easily, and you can start to think about types of comparisons in which you're going to make adjustments to the standard loan structure, possibly looking to pay it off earlier, and if you were to add points or if you were to add lender credits or something like that, and then think about paying it off earlier, and those types of scenarios are things that are a lot easier to do if you have an Excel worksheet that you can manipulate to do that than if you're using the online tools. Also note that we will look at some formatting on the bottom here. If you'd like to use this table and say, is there a way that I can clean this thing up so it doesn't have like the negative numbers, or it cleans up the negative numbers down below so I can see the totals at the bottom of my amortization table for something like this when I pay it off early, or if I'm comparing loans that are 40-year, 30-year, 15-year, and I want to go back and forth with the same amortization schedule format. There are ways we can clean that up. We might just look at some Excel tips on that as well and give you that kind of worksheet and information.